Hello. Huh? That's when you have a studio in the house. I don't know if you can hear everything in the background, but good morning. It is roughly 10:07 on Tuesday morning here in the Gulf Coast, Central Time, United States, the Gulf of Mexico. It should be coming up on Substack. Um, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. We may have to. We're still learning the ins and outs of this. It should be connecting up to Substack, hopefully. I may have to have a powwow with the help desk on Substack. This is a beta thing, so it may be that we're just still figuring out the bugs and the ins and outs of that. It doesn't work like the other streaming services or other platforms that we use to stream to in a live stream. So I'm looking at it, Julie, and I don't see it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Something started. Oh no, that was yours that you posted. So yeah, not sure what's going on there. Okay. So, for those of you on Substack, we're still working out the bugs. For the rest of you on YouTube and hello, Rumble, um, we are live and I have the chat open for YouTube folks. So, it's a beautiful morning here on the Gulf Coast. I was going to say something about the Gulf of Mexico. We are also part of the Mississippi Sound. So, yeah, that's just off the coast right here, about 5-minute bike ride. I can see Russia from here. No, I can't. I can't even see Mexico from here. I can't even see the islands that make up the Mississippi Sound. So, but I can see the water once I get over the crust of the. Anyway, I want to thank people for. Hang on a second. I have a text. Okay. So I have the chat open. I was just about to do that. I want to thank some people. We went on for the first time yesterday, and had a dire announcement. And so, although we were able to keep our, we've made it to the point where we can keep our utilities on, and from and keep them from getting disconnected. We are not out of danger. Even though even a small $10 or $20 one-time donation will really help keep us going, and keep the roof over our heads. We've invested a lot of equity into this house, both sweat equity, infrastructure equity, and into the actual cost of the house. So we don't want to leave it. We love it here, and this is sort of, if there was any sort of dream house that I ever had, I don't necessarily believe in that, but this is the closest thing that would be to it. I love the city of Biloxi. I love the Gulf Coast, and I really don't want to leave it. When you find a place to live that you feel is in your heart and part of where you belong, I haven't felt like I belong to any place in a long, long time. I don't know if ever. And I sort of feel that here, probably more than anywhere else. Even in San Francisco, it's a beautiful city, but I've never felt, and I lived there for 33 years, never really quite felt like it was, quite the place I belonged. And I feel that here more than anywhere else. So we really want to stay here. And I wanted to thank a few people for stepping it up and contributing, because all those contributions are really making a difference. And again, we're not out of danger yet. We're not out of the woods, as it were. We still have a little bit to go, if not a lot to go, because I am out of work. That's why I'm broadcasting today. And I need to, and I'm in the process of looking. And as I said yesterday, there's millions of people in my position right now, and there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who do what I do, which is a user experience designer. I've been at it for 25 years. I don't think there's a lot of people that can say that, but there are hundreds of thousands of people like me who do what I do, who are also out of work. And something we noticed yesterday, before I get into the thank yous, is that there's a lot of new postings on jobs that are all in office. And I think that the companies have been trying to get people back into the offices because, they have this real estate that they're holding on to that is empty because they abandoned their offices for, work at home or remote work because of something that happened 5 years, which is actually what we're going to be reading about today. So I think that they have been laying people off who are remote workers and then rehiring people as in-office workers. So that's awesome. But I don't know if that for sure. That's just something that I intuited based on what I know. All right, what I see, which is often what we do here in our analysis. We use our intuition. We use what we know and put the pieces together using lateral thinking and intuition, and intuition is basically background knowledge and your experience and putting the pieces together in your mind and doing what my UX researchers call synthesizing that information. So what we do is we synthesize it, we put it together, and we then give it to you as we report it. Okay, shout outs, thank yous. We want to thank William and Fernando for their one-time donations, and also thank you out to Frida, Liz, Dee, and Matt for subscribing to our Substack page. A special shout out goes out to our patrons who have stuck with us throughout the years. We have created some of the most insightful, thought-provoking video essays in the past and plan to bring more creative artistry back into view as soon as we are out of this crisis. We are also deeply grateful to friends and family who have donated to us personally. So thank you again. And yes, there's some friends and family that have donated to us far beyond what we thought would come. And so you know who you are. I know you don't like to be mentioned, but I'm getting emotional here. Something came through last night and it was pretty amazing. So thank you. But again, we're not out of the woods yet. Okay. What we're really looking for, and yes, what you can afford. Small donations are fine. Please, use the paypal.me/Book of Hours, Cash App, $Book of Hours. You can contact us directly at info@bookofhours.com, info@book-of-hours.com. And but we're also looking for some regular money coming in monthly through Patreon. So you can go to patreon.com/Book of Hours, or you can go to Substack and become a subscriber. So like Frida, Liz, Dee, and Matt, they subscribe to Substack, and that's awesome. We have no new Patreon patrons, so or maybe we do. I don't remember, but if we do, I'll look you up and thank you tomorrow. But thank you to all of you, old patrons, who stuck with us, new patrons who are joining now, and then everybody who's been giving us personal donations, one-time donations. You guys are all awesome. And a shout out to Europe. My God, we've been getting UK, which is officially not part of Europe, but the UK and the Netherlands seem to be a place where we're reaching. So a shout out to y'all, now that we're in the South, y'all out there in the European continent and the islands. Oh, wow. Okay, so I started doing this yesterday, and it's called the Daily Report, or just Daily Report. And because I wanted to give a vehicle to us to try to build up our subscriber base, but also give you guys something to latch onto, something daily that is interesting and insightful, and gives you something to look at. I know I like seeing regular stuff. I haven't really been looking at a lot of videos a lot lately because I've been busy trying to keep the walls from falling over, and that's a metaphor. And the roof caving in. This is a very sound house, but metaphorically, we're. So anyway, I wanted to create something that was a vehicle to give you guys something to reintroduce us to a new audience and say hi to our old audience. For those of you new to us, during COVID, and even before that, we started creating what we called video essays, and we started with something about the one of the first ones we did that was pretty big, and we recorded it and edited it on our old MacBook. It wasn't even a MacBook Pro, or it might be, but it was a little one. It's over here. I can see it, and it's like I bought it maybe I don't know 15, maybe 15 years ago. It can't even update to the new operating systems, so we use it to write on and do other stuff that we can do with it. And we use SneakerNet, basically plug in a little thumb drive and then transfer it over, or we use a backup drive to transfer files over to the new computer. But it's still a little tool that we like to use and keep around as a reminder of our humble beginnings. And we're still not very, we're still kind of not very pro. But we try to make it as pro as possible. But we edited this video called, oh wow, now I can't even remember the name of it. Julie, do you remember? It was about the video that was about the school in San Francisco. Yeah, about the school that it was.
Yeah, it was called Expulsion.
Expulsion. Yeah, Expulsion. And Expulsion was about some WPA era. So this is post. This is during the Depression, during the Great Depression in the 30s and 40s, or well, the 20s and 30s. Well, I guess the 30s, basically, the 1930s and into the 40s before the U.S. joined World War II. San Francisco has an abundance of these wonderful murals all throughout the city, and they're all mostly, if not all, in the fresco format. And fresco is a different kind of mural. Fresco is an ancient form of art that you put dry pigment into, or even wet pigment maybe, into wet plaster, so that the pigment is actually embedded into the plaster. It's part of the wall. Okay. And this goes back to like Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel and before him in the early Renaissance. And so it's an old art form, and it requires a special way of working. Anyway, there were a lot of artists that were working in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time. And there was a mural that was commissioned by the architect who was building a new school. It was a high school in San Francisco. And it was, ironically, it was in Nancy Pelosi's district at the time. And she, as part of, what we were to see coming up as sort of a radical part of the DEI and I don't even know what to call the movement, because I don't like to use the conservative words. But it was a radical reformation of how we view history, and how we see ourselves. And it was turning things that were actually trying to point out the wrongs that were leveled against society, against Black people, Native Americans, Hispanics, people who are considered minorities in the United States, but certainly people who have been marginalized throughout history, through slavery and killing. What's the word I'm looking for? slaughtering, whole societies and people, and making that into an art, and telling the story of what was going on. Especially, it was George Washington High School, and it actually depicted George Washington as being pretty much responsible for um, the deaths of Native Americans and actual slavery that was going on. The artist, and his name isn't coming to me at the moment. We say it in the video, and you can go back to YouTube and see this. It's called Expulsion. He depicted slavery on George Washington's property in Mount. Boy, I'm really having trouble with my names now, but on his estate. So I wanted to call it Mount Washington, but that's a place in Pittsburgh. So anyway, it's a very interesting video. It was a beautiful. The murals were stunning, absolutely stunning. And they were being threatened with basically being painted over and destroyed, completely destroyed. They were saved. I think at some point they put some sort of covering over them. I'm hoping that has come down now that all this bullshit has gone away. I hope so. I haven't had an update about that lately. But anyway, the whole point of what I'm trying to talk about here is that we started our videos commenting on social, political, and cultural issues. And that one really struck home because even though we were living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the time, we were also still San Franciscans at heart. And Julie was born in the Bay Area. I lived there for 33 years, as I said. I wasn't born there, but I moved there in my early 20s. And it was home, and those murals were as much a part of that home as anything else. And to see this destruction of something that was so beautiful and that was so moving and important, because a lot of our history has been whitewashed through the history books, changing the narratives and the way we look at how our country developed in the United States, the politicians and the so-called founders. In that video, a guy makes a statement that says something like 12 of the presidents 12 of the presidents of the United States, I think that was the number, were slave owners, which is just phenomenal. It's pretty remarkable to think about. So slavery is just as much a part of our cultural heritage and our history, not something to be celebrated, but something to be remembered, so that we know what has happened before in order to understand what might take place in the future. And yesterday I made a statement that I believe that we are moving towards a new form of indentured servitude, which is, maybe a step or two above slavery. And now I just lost the word again. A specific type of slavery. Basically the kind of slavery that we had going on in the United States, chattel slavery. And it's basically, it's sort of the equivalent of serfdom. It was an updated version of serfdom. And something that we've noticed is that our society with capitalism, which, came about, started forming. There's our cat walking by. Hello, Roxy. Starting in probably the 15th century, at the beginning of the Enlightenment and through the Enlightenment and beyond into the Industrial Revolution, capitalism embraced and used chattel slavery as a way of building up capital earnings and capital throughout the New World and in other parts of the Old World, in Asia and the Americas. So, and drawing it from Africa, and not only Africa, but Philippines, China, and other places. And my whole point is that, you know, we've seen trends or cycles within capitalism where they use something, the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, the people who run things, whatever you want to call them, they run a program like chattel slavery for as long as it works and as long as it makes money for them, and then they find another thing and they move it on with that. And what I pointed out before is that chattel slavery has basically folded into or became wage slavery after the Industrial Revolution, because you know the Civil War wasn't necessarily about freeing the slaves. The Civil War was an economic war, and it was the announcement that things were changing from chattel slavery, which no longer really worked anymore. Made a lot of people a lot of money while it was working, but they found that it wasn't working so much for them. And so they made all of us slaves through basically tying us to wages. And something that I want to point out too is later on in the Industrial Revolution, maybe before the second Industrial Revolution, Henry Ford, who was building automobiles in his factories, found that paying people more actually tied them even closer and made them more loyal to their oppressor through wage slavery, because now they had a stake that really meant something. They were able to afford to buy homes and places to settle down and buy the product they were actually building, and feel like they were more part of a larger community and not just an oppressed slave state. But it was something that most of us are familiar with, that is now going away, and that was the middle class and a consumer society. And I think it's because consumer economy, a consumer society economy, is now no longer working for the billionaires. They now want to take our money in other ways, and they've been siphoning the money up and up for decades, and now they're still not getting enough, and now they want to siphon it out of our homes, which is where most middle class people have their wealth. They don't invest the way that the billionaires do, but the way that the investor class does. Their investments, like me, like a lot of you, your investment is in your home and in your 401ks, and that seems to be where they're focusing their attention. What better way to siphon that money out of 401ks than to make people withdraw that money out of that, put it into the economy, and pull that up into wealth for themselves again. So it's pretty remarkable. I just got a text from Julie. Says, "Don't forget to read the morning email." Yeah, I'm sorry. I get into these lectures, but I think that's part of what makes our broadcast interesting. I hope so. Anyway, I hope this is something that you find interesting and that you won't tune out for. So I'm trying to basically give you an idea of what's actually happening in the context of in real time, I guess. What millions of Americans are experiencing right now is that siphoning of their wealth into the pockets, or at least into the coffers or the spreadsheets of the ultra wealthy. And you have people like Elon Musk going in and raiding the government of people who actually pay the bills and keep the things running, in between the presidents and the Congresses and the, all that. So we've been seeing since COVID, and maybe even before through other means like climate change excuses and things like that, the investor class are siphoning off pension funds and things like that, where they'll convince the pension fund holder to invest in things like carbon sequestration, and other, climate change actions using technology that isn't proven, and investing that money and then just having it disperse. And so that money gets siphoned from the pension funds and into the investor class once again. So they will use excuses like climate change or COVID, or, there's too many people working in the government, or you're just making too much money, or you're not sharing your money because you're putting it in your house, whatever they're going to blame you for, so that they can get that wealth into their pockets. And that's always awesome. Okay, so I mentioned COVID a moment ago. I'm going to share the morning email. Let's see here. And the morning email is titled, oh, there it is. What COVID taught us. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of stupid, but it is. I love this illustration that they have here, as if the COVID ball, the little virus there, is levitating over a mat, as if I keep asking who's gone to jail yet. Here, let me show that on. Nobody's going to go to jail. That's just it. We keep hearing this apocryphal story of the bankers going to Obama hat in hand after the 2007, 2008 crisis. After that went away, or after that happened, and they had hat in hand, and they were, like, they thought they were in trouble, and Obama's like, yeah, no problem, guys, and I'm going to make it better for you. I don't know if that actually happened or not, but it's a good story, and one that kind of explains, where we are with everything. It's like the billionaires, and the bankers, and the people who run things, whatever you want to call them. I've said that before, because I don't really like to identify, groups, or use a lot of jargon. So I'll use generic terms like, investor class and the billionaires. Anyway, this COVID is like, as if it's a wise guru with its legs crossed, and it's holding up its mudra, its Buddhist mudra, and teaching us a lesson. Fuck that. Ugh, I fucking hate the New York Times sometimes, but as I said yesterday, even though it's a liberal rag, it is also a very good window on, what's going on in the world. And if you understand where it's coming from its point of view, you can analyze it and take, something from it. So they said, good morning. Our colleague Claire Kane Miller shares some lessons from the pandemic. We're also covering the stock market and activist arrest and balloon art. And I'm not going to get into that stuff. The balloon art is just a little blurb, and it's just about more kitsch that's passing itself off as art. As John, okay, his name went away too. Anyway, as somebody we know would say. So, okay, so let me read this to you. When the pandemic upended our lives 5 years ago today, it gave researchers a rare chance to learn more about who we are and how we live. The entire world changed at once, creating natural experiments everywhere. What happens when sports teams play in an empty stadium? Or in empty stadiums, plural. When the government sends people money, when women stop wearing high heels, and when children stop going to school. In many cases, it was impossible to know what caused the specific changes. Some aspect of the COVID pandemic or another invisible influence. Let's see, let me read that again. In many cases, it was impossible to know what caused the specific changes. Some aspect of the COVID pandemic or another invisible influence. Okay, that didn't seem like a sentence to me, but anyway. But the findings demystified several aspects of our world. My colleague, Ireneo Cabreros, I tried pronouncing that name earlier today, so I'm sorry I murdered it. Ireneo Cabreros, sorry. And I wrote about them in a story we published today. And that link goes to a paywall story, so I won't read that to you. I'll read you this email. Here are some highlights. Crowds help the home team. When sports teams played in empty stadiums, research showed that yes, the fans made a difference. Okay, we're going to have a lot of duh moments here in this reading, so you'll have to bear with me here. Um, no kidding, man. I mean, so here's the thing. It's like we all know that we are social beings and we need to be around others, and that other people's energy is, influences us. And so no shit that sports teams, and I'm going to I need to say something here to Julie. Um, so yeah, no kidding that the sports teams did better when fans were around, even though it isn't always obvious whether it's a game that's fixed or not. Anyway, they were less likely to win at home and had poorer performances. This is when people weren't in the stadium cheering them on. The effect was smaller for teams already accustomed to smaller crowds. But the home advantage wasn't just about fans. When the NBA restarted play, the top 22 teams isolated in Orlando, Florida, allowing researchers to study the effects of jet lag. Rebounding, shooting, accuracy, and wins were all higher among players who hadn't traveled across time zones. Now, that's kind of interesting, but not, because it's like when you're well rested, you're going to perform better, right? But the interesting thing about that statement, that little part of that paragraph, was that they all isolated in Orlando, Florida, which Florida is a warmer place, right? And people were talking about getting outside into the warmer weather, and and they'll talk about this in a minute, like getting outside. But Florida was the place where a lot of people go, especially the conservatives went during COVID to get away from the bullshit. So not only was there less masking and BS going on in Florida, it still existed. It happened. We featured some video in one of our videos where we were showing something from the University of Florida, Southern Florida, USF, that was all about masking and all about the bullshit. But so it wasn't 100% in Florida, but a lot of people went there to escape it. So I think it's interesting that the top 22 teams of the NBA isolated in Orlando, Florida. Okay, so yeah, obviously when people are more rested, they perform better. Virtual doctor visits work. I don't know if this is true or not. I don't believe this. Okay, but let me read you the paragraph. Telehealth, once uncommon, accounted for half of medical visits early in the pandemic. Mostly patients and doctors were satisfied with seeing one another online. Telehealth lowered healthcare costs. It was especially useful for treating chronic illnesses and for psychotherapy. And in some cases, the pandemic revealed people don't need to see a doctor at all. Okay, so these first few points here, it was especially useful for treating chronic illnesses and for psychotherapy. All right, I get that. You don't need to really have a physical examination. They don't need to really get into things. If you have an established situation and a relationship with a doctor and you're treating a chronic illness, checking in online on a video, that makes sense. Psychotherapy, yeah, I can see that. You don't necessarily have to be in the same room with that person. But again, going back to the previous point of crowds and people being together, I feel that you get a lot more out of talking to somebody if you're dealing with talk therapy than if you were doing it online. Okay. And in some cases, the pandemic revealed that people don't need to see a doctor at all. And, that may be true as well, because, there's a lot of, and they're going to get into this in a second. There's a lot of people who, if they feel like they can't go into the hospital, or there's a problem, or they're just they're scared to go into the hospital, or whatever the case may be, for any reason, it kind of curtails that kind of behavior that makes people think they have something all the time. And there's a word for that. It's not coming to me. The number of patients showing up with mild appendicitis decreased, while the number with complicated appendicitis didn't change, which suggested that some people who typically have had surgery recovered on their own, or they didn't have appendicitis at all. Okay, which is what they think the underlying message is here. Okay. I think that this paragraph is part right, part wrong, but because I don't think you're going to get as much from visiting a doctor or from telemedicine as you are from visiting somebody, where you can have a little more conversation. However, what this does, this paragraph is telling us, is it kind of folds into the idea of doctors not like reducing the cost of healthcare through other means other than like having your doctor, actually be in the same room with you, to spending a lot of time with you. I was working for Optum Healthcare, and Optum Healthcare is one of those companies that have been instrumental in cutting down the time a doctor takes to spend with a patient. They have been trying to reduce, it's in the name Optum. They spell it differently, but optimize, right? They're the kind of company that counts keystrokes and monitors bathroom time for clinicians, people who are not doctors, but people who work in the clinics, the support staff. They have been trying to optimize time of doctors, looking at optimizing like operating room usage, and making sure that rooms don't go unused. And, okay, I understand they want to try to cut costs wherever they can, but some of those costs across the board end up, being ridiculous and actually hurting people. And taking away from, just basically sucking your soul and taking away your human spirit. So this is why doctors aren't talking to you and as much. And this is why this paragraph kind of folds into that idea and kind of introduces that idea of like, well, if we're going to cut the cost of healthcare, I guess, we have to reduce the quality of care. Through other means. But hey, that quality of care is still there because, you're seeing somebody on the telescreen. Okay, so I just don't buy into this 100%. And I'm going to say I don't buy into the allopathic medical system anyway. As I said yesterday, we had to kind of put ourselves back into it for various reasons, and we don't like it, but we're dealing with it, and we try to have minimal exposure to it. Okay, so they say virtual doctor visits work, but virtual school does not, and I would agree 100%. And this is another one of those duh moments, right? It's like, no shit, Sherlock. So when it came to learning, remote schooling wasn't enough. This illustration is kind of funny, with the robot, sort of Jetsons robot looking character here teaching school. Okay. When it came to learning, remote schooling wasn't enough. Across the country, in rich and poor districts, among white, Black, and Hispanic students, funny they don't mention Asian, but anyway, textbooks, they always leave out the Asians, and I don't know why that is. Maybe the society considers Asians not marginalized enough. I don't know. Anyway, not sure why that is. I'm just making a comment. Across the country, in rich and poor districts, among white, Black, and Hispanic students, test scores in reading and math fell. Many students still haven't caught up. There was learning loss even in countries that had shorter school closures than the United States did. But the data is clear. The sooner children return to classrooms, even part-time, the better they did. Yeah, okay. Yep. No arguments here. Dolphins talked more. Okay, this is weird. But it makes sense. When humans were less active, what scientists call anthropause, that's a really funny word. I love that. Anthropause. So we curtailed our activities around, moving around. Basically, when we stopped doing the shit that we do, like driving cars and, flying jets and going across, going out in motorized boats, the animals felt more comfortable with their environment and, decided to be more free and open and happy. But this also kind of points to some of the narratives that were going around during that time, that, people are bad, and human activities are bad, and that the world would be better if humans didn't do what they do. Okay, so that plays into, the curtailing of human activity, human economies, human population, and the reduction of human population in order to save the planet and save wildlife and nature. Okay, now I've always been politically more of an environmentalist, but I also feel that kind of narrative is not helping anything. It's blaming people for being people. And the very reason that we have cars and motorized boats and do the things that we do is because, going back to what I was talking about before, where the billionaires and the investor class and the people who run the world made it so that they were making money from us being consumers, buying cars, and then making it even harder for us to not have those cars by creating suburban sprawl and getting people to live out into the suburbs, away from the cities, where you could walk to work or you could take a bus to work or whatever. And now blaming people for, living in the exurbs or the suburbs or whatever, and having to have cars and polluting the world and running over animals and being active and making the world an unsafe place for wildlife. And this translates back, and this also goes back to maybe the turn of the 20th century and then the 19th century, when the wealthy and the ruling class were calling themselves conservationists. And they were, I talked about this yesterday, and they were basically, hiding or protecting or preserving, I guess, natural settings from the rabble. Okay, so it was okay for the wealthy to go out into this pristine preservation, to even go hunting if they wanted to, because they're rich. But the rest of us can't do that. And so this has roots that go deep throughout our society. And this blaming people. I remember there was even a video we were watching, this guy who basically, it was sort of the beginning of his series of videos where he travels around and talks to people in different places. And he was from San Francisco, and he started in the hills around the San Francisco Bay. And he was on a little hike, and he ended up running into this woman, and she was like, "Oh, I just returned from traveling or in other parts of the world," and basically saying, "Oh, it's a place where people don't always have hot showers, and Americans shouldn't have hot showers all the time. We depend on that too much." And like just blaming people for living the life that they're kind of required to live if they're going to live and work in modern society. Can you imagine like showing up to the office or to your workplace and you haven't bathed in a while, because hot showers are bad? Like, this is the kind of like counteractive narrative that really is blaming people for being people, and blaming people for participating in a society that they didn't set up in the first place. Okay, so that critique is not coming from a conservative or liberal point of view. I'm pointing this out, that we're all being blamed for being just who we are. Okay, so let me read this paragraph for you. When humans were less active, what scientists call the anthropause, animals began breeding more and traveling farther. Dolphins whistled longer. Birds changed their song, and sea turtles laid more eggs. In some places, predators or invasive species arrived. Urban wildlife that had become accustomed to coexisting with humans and our trash, like crows or raccoons, retreated. It revealed the ways in which humans both threaten and protect the natural world, scientists said. Now, the bit about the crows, I've noticed that we haven't seen a lot of crows around lately either, but I have a feeling it has a lot more to do with invasive technologies that we can't see, like the spraying in the skies and electronic waves of some sort or another, than it has to do with us staying inside and not having our trash out or whatever. Because there's ways of getting around raccoons getting into your trash. That's the way it is. Now, bears are another story, but okay. So that's what scientists said. Okay. Now here's something that's interesting. And I don't know how true it is. Men do less. The lockdowns okay, this probably feeds into the sort of Me Too thing too. And the fact that we're seeing, more women in the workplace, for another reason other than this. But anyway, the lockdowns brought a crush of domestic labor. More dishes piled up and more needy children were underfoot. But even when men worked from home, women still handled more of the work. 8 in 10 mothers said they managed remote schooling. Fathers overestimated their contribution, surveys found. And again, this survey or this information is behind a paywall, so you can't really check it out for yourself unless you subscribe to the New York Times. That's likely a reason mothers' antidepressant use increased when schools were closed, but not fathers. Mothers were more likely than men to cut back at work, though they returned as soon as they could. Only couples who want egalitarian relationships, researchers wrote, can overcome the stickiness of gender inequality in household work. Okay. I've worked from home for years, for decades, in fact. I ran a business out of my home for years, and I'm used to it, so cleaning up after myself was never an issue. But here's the thing, too. This sentence here where it says mothers were more likely to, more likely to cut back at work. I never noticed that. In all the dealings that I had in my meetings, they weren't cutting back on their work, though they returned as soon as they could. And, again, I think it points to something that we talked about before, probably last Saturday at our bookmark. And that is that a lot of the men were the ones that got laid off and the women were not. And it was a cynical attempt to show that they're more diverse. And maybe even here where it's like, well, those women, they're tough. They return to work, you lazy men. It's because it's a cynical way of basically saving money, because women have never been paid the same as men. And so, that's just the way it is. And not meaning that I support that, meaning that, corporations find any way they can to save money, and maintain some sort of workforce. And whether that's getting rid of a lot of people and making the rest of them work harder, and or doing like what I was just saying, finding people that they can keep, that they can pay less. Okay, plants make us happy. Again, file under duh. People flocked to natural areas when they could, and they were better off for it. A study in Hong Kong compared people who lived near urban green spaces with those who didn't. It found that parks provided physical activity as a refuge. A study in 9 countries found that access to nature, even a balcony or a garden at home, improved people's moods. And a study in Taiwan analyzed the window-wall ratio in people's quarantine rooms and found that more windows, especially ones that offered views of vegetation, made them happier. Oh boy. Okay, let me dig into this one. I find it interesting that they're quoting studies that were in Asia and not necessarily the United States. Hong Kong is a very impacted population. And we pointed out early on, in one of our first videos, after the pandemic was announced, and we did it from Shenley Park in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's a beautiful park. It's very lots of like the natural resource or the natural settings there are different than like say Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, which was actually designed and created out of sand dunes. So Shenley Park has natural trees that were, that just grew up there. The streams and lakes and things are, natural springs and rivers or streams and stuff. And so it's a very lovely place to be. And we set our video where Julie and I talked to our audience and tried to explain things of what was going on in that natural setting. And I think we chose that because we felt that it was necessary to be in that natural setting. It made us feel better and more relaxed. And I think it helped, people who viewed the video to feel the same way. We wanted to set that tone. This is why they closed all the parks and why they didn't close all of the parks, but they closed parts of them. They closed the bathrooms and the playgrounds and the drinking fountains. So people were allowed to go out in the natural setting, but they weren't allowed to have the comforts of something they usually expected, like a place to pee. When we did a walk around in Shenley Park as part of that, in that period, we had to go find bushes to pee in because they locked the bathrooms. I think that these studies that they're talking about are confirmational type of data that they already knew, and they used it to kind of confirm what they already knew, which is redundant. I just said that, but and that they're going to use it for future reference in whatever they do next. And I feel like a lot of conservative people talk about how we're being culled and put into 15-minute cities and all this stuff. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think that the re-urbanization of human society is going to take place. That they want to pull people from suburban and exurban and rural locations and put them into cities and more urban environments to get, again, going back up to what we were talking about here, where dolphins talked more. That sort of idea of conservation and taking away natural settings from people, even though they know and they say that, people do better with access to natural settings. They're going to basically say, oh, well, pizza is a vegetable and you can have a window that looks out on a natural setting and you can have a house plant, and that's the same thing, really. So, get more house plants. Get a balcony on your multi unit tower with a view of the park, and you'll be fine. Okay, so I think that's that's where this is headed, rather than anything else. But anyway, so yeah, so this is confirmation of what they already knew, and they're telling us what we already knew. So then they finally finish up here with saying, there were so many other striking findings, such as how easy it is to lift children out of poverty and how dangerous high heels can be for women. Well, again, no duh. And I think that particular thing came out of the high heels came out of the fact that people weren't going to work, and so women weren't dressing up as much, and so their backs didn't hurt as much, right? Or whatever other effects that they're calling out in this. Here's a bunch of photos so the Times asked 19 photographers to revisit their most enduring images of the pandemic, and again, paywall, so you can't really see that, but here's a few of those images. So a woman in a mask getting shot up. Probably a woman in a mask. Oh my God, look at the tape lines on that. So there was a woman watching another woman play violin outdoors, and I don't think the violinist had a mask on. Let's see as this comes back around. Yeah, so people dying, getting shot up. and then dying. Oh, yeah, the violinist does not have a mask on, but they were in an isolated box via tape on the floor. And here's a guy eating alone in a restaurant, and there's somebody being held down, forced, having air, oxygen forced on them, and yeah. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna calm down here. Okay, I'm gonna read some of these headlines, and then I'm gonna wrap it up. And remember that these are opinion based and opinion-based headlines. Okay, so take them with a grain of salt. But I think that some of them also have a sense of truth to them as well. So it's somewhere in the middle. Wall Street had its worst day of the year so far after President Trump suggested that his trade policies could cause a recession. Markets in Asia are down this morning. Yeah, so that's probably true. And it's probably because of the efforts of the Trump administration to do the things that Trump wants to do as a billionaire businessman. Tech stocks suffered suffered some of the hardest falls. That's interesting. Not sure why that is. NASDAQ experienced its biggest one-day drop since 2022. The Wall Street Journal reports. Here's something that's fun. A fun fact. Tesla shares fell 15% in a day. So I guess, Elon Musk posing as Mussolini doesn't really work. People don't like it. The company's stock price, which soared after the election, has halved since December. People don't like electric cars, I'm just saying. Trump campaigned on a promise of, okay, and here's the other weird thing, okay? So the people who like electric cars are the liberals, okay? But the liberals are the ones that hate Elon Musk the most. I'm just saying. Hence, 15% drop in a day. And half of the stock price let's see, it has halved since December. Okay, well, I'm just saying. There was that video of the musician who where she was like, I'm donating my Tesla and I'm saying goodbye to it and all that shit. Yeah, that's just posing. Anyway, Russia, that's performative politics, right? Russia, Ukraine targeted Moscow with a major drone attack. Moscow's mayor said the attack was the largest against the city since the war began. And, again, remember the New York Times, supports Ukraine and the Ukraine war and all that bullshit. And they've vilified Russia. I'm not supporting either. But anyway, I'm wondering what kind of drones they were. Were they like little tiny, like drones that, take photos, or were they like the big US kind of military drones? If that was the case, that's not good for the people of Moscow. Okay, Volodymyr Zelensky has offered a truce on long-range strikes like this, but Ukraine appears to be sending a reminder of its power. Okay, yeah, that small country next to the big country. Yeah. Okay, Ukrainian and American officials will meet today for their first high-level talks on a ceasefire since an Oval Office shouting match between their presidents. You don't have the cards. Anyway, okay. The rest of this is just kind of stuff that, whatever, informs you. It's not really all that important. Let's just face it. Philippine presidents are all criminals. Pope Francis is out of imminent danger from pneumonia. The Kurdish-led militia that controls northeastern Syria agreed to merge with the country's new government. Despite backing rebels at a war in Congo, Rwanda still lures tourists and investors. Well, there's another country that does that too. They back rebels at war and they support wars around the world, but they still have tourists and investors. What country would that be? Might be the country I'm living in right now. Anyway, so what's the big deal with that? That's a very liberal perspective. Trump is wooing Republican lawmakers while maintaining an implicit threat to ruin them if they stray from his agenda. But I think, as we pointed out, a lot of the Doge agenda was being curtailed because the Republican lawmakers were straying from the agenda and saying, you're killing us and go fuck yourself if you think you're going to make a deal with us in the future. So this is a little half-baked and not quite true. At the start of his term, and let me just say, we're getting into an hour here, so I'm going to wrap this up. Okay, that doesn't really matter. This is a weird one because I'm not really sure what it's saying to us. I might have to spend more time on it. But as a measles outbreak spreads, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. raised alarms about measles vaccines, despite evidence of their safety. Okay. Next, the Justice Department's pardon attorney opposed a request to restore Mel Gibson's gun rights. The department fired her a day later. Okay, so this is just an illustration of where the political pendulum has swung. Okay. Mel Gibson's gun rights. Okay. The U.S. Energy Secretary, before a crowd of oil and gas executives, promised to reverse the government's focus on climate change. You say that like it's a bad thing. But really what's going on there is it's not climate change. They're going to ignore regulations around pollution. That's what's really going to be happening. Amazon will stream The Apprentice, deepening the company's relationship with Trump. I look forward to watching the show myself, Trump said in an Amazon statement. You mean he hasn't watched it before? Okay, whatever. Okay. I'm going to end it there. I hope you liked our morning report. Once again, please become a patron at patreon.com/bookofhours. Become a Substack. Oh wow, I'm gonna have to read the. I haven't been reading the comments. Sorry about that. Because when I'm reading the email, I'm looking at the screen, not the screen you're looking at right now. So anyway, my apologies. You can be a subscriber on Substack for as little as $2 or $5 or something like that. These things help us a lot. These monthly subscriptions really help us out a lot. Or you can make a one-time donation to paypal.me/bookofhours. You know, $20, $5, I don't know, $10. It doesn't have to be big ticket. But if a lot of you, gave us a donation, it really helps. Okay. So patreon.com/bookofhours, Substack, make a one-time donation to PayPal, paypal.me/bookofhours, or Cash App, $bookofhours. Okay, let's read some of these comments. Undefined JB said, what a joke. I refused telehealth when they pushed it. I refused to teach cello lessons via Zoom. Yeah, no shit. I agree with you. That's bullshit. That's nonsense. Okay. Okay. Julie said to make a one-time donation, go to paypal.me/bookofhours. Thank you, Frida. These daily chats and readings are excellent. You're welcome. Thank you for saying that. Okay. I think that's it. Cool. All right, guys. We're just over an hour right now, or just at an hour, looks like. Yeah, an hour and 3 minutes. So I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to say thank you for viewing, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for viewing. Leave your comments if you're not watching this live, and subscribe and donate. We're going to keep these going, and I'm glad you appreciate them. We are still fundraising. Yes, we are still fundraising, and we're not out of the woods yet. So keep it going, and we will talk to you again tomorrow around the same time, I'm hoping. So 10 a.m. Central Time. So that's 11 a.m. East Coast, and let me do the math, 8 a.m. West Coast time. But if you want to pick it up as a recording, that's cool too. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.